Well, hello everyone from the land of Israel, Jerusalem. I'm here outside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is behind me. There's actually quite a bit of construction currently happening, so it doesn't look quite as normal as the 4 times that I've been here in the past, but I'll try to go up here and give you all a bit of a panoramic view, and of course I'll be showing you the inside and outside with some B-roll footage too. So I wanted to share with you all a little bit about this site. So this site is believed to have been where Jesus Christ was crucified on the cross by the Roman authorities. Catholics and some of the other Orthodox in the church also believe that he was buried inside the church. I do not hold to that view, and I will explain why in a little bit. So to start, as to why I believe that this is actually the Golgotha Rock, this is actually the site where Jesus was crucified. Of course, there are disputes. Protestants often go to the Garden Tomb and talk about that rock there and talk about tombs there. I cannot kind of accede to that as the actual location for a few reasons. The first issue with the Garden Tomb, the main issue, is that the tombs there have been dated to the First Temple period. Jesus was crucified during the Second Temple period, which ended in 70 CE, so obviously there's a dating dispute there. We know that Joseph of Arimathea put him in a brand new tomb, and so none of that makes sense that Jesus was buried off the Garden Tomb, although it is a very serene spot, and I enjoy visiting, of course. The reason that I think the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is such a good option for the crucifixion of Jesus Christ is, first, we have Empress Helena, the mother of Constantine, the Holy Roman Emperor, who actually came here in 326 CE. And when she came to Jerusalem, she went around and she asked the people living here and said, where was Jesus crucified? And he was crucified around 30 or 33 CE. So it makes sense that she, coming less than 300 years later, would be told the correct location for where Jesus was crucified. I think that there would have been enough tradition that was going on for people to have kind of kept up the location of where Jesus was crucified. Less than 300 years is not a lot of time, and I think that people would have basically known, yes, this is the site where Jesus Christ was crucified. It just makes sense from that perspective. So the most compelling reason for me and why I believe that this is the location where Jesus was crucified is thanks to Constantine's mother, Empress Helena, Constantine being the Holy Roman Emperor, coming to Jerusalem in 326 CE. And when she came to Jerusalem, she asked the people living here, where was Jesus crucified? I want to see where my Lord was crucified. And people told her, it was this spot. It was the Church of the Holy Sepulchre right behind me, a Golgotha Rock in there. Now, Jesus was crucified in 30 or 33 CE. There are some debates around when specifically that was, but less than 300 years from the time of the crucifixion of Jesus until Empress Helena showing up, that's not a ton of time. I think that there would have been continuity at the site of people knowing where Jesus was crucified and keeping up with that, and then able to tell her the real site. One of the main problems that people have with this location being the Golgotha Rock, the site where Jesus was crucified, is that we're actually inside the gates of the old city of Jerusalem right now. To get here this morning, I walked through the Jaffa Gate, and then I walked through a quarter of the city, and then was able to arrive here. And we have to note that the Romans would not have been performing their mass executions, their mass crucifixions, where people were obviously dying, lots of dead bodies, lots of death. That would not have been happening inside the walls of Jerusalem. But what's fascinating is that these walls that currently stand around Jerusalem, that put the Church of the Holy Sepulchre inside the old city of Jerusalem, did not stand at the time in 30 or 33 CE when Jesus was crucified. So that's a really, really fascinating point that I think makes this even more compelling, that this was outside of the city limits and there could have been crucifixions happening here. Now, I do have to take issue with one thing that is believed inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and that is the believed tomb of Jesus. So, I don't know, maybe 100 yards or so from the Golgotha Rock that you can touch, And then I'll show you. You can walk over and there is a supposed location of the tomb of Jesus where he was taken from the cross and then buried in that tomb of Joseph of Arimathea. We know that Joseph of Arimathea had a brand new tomb. He was a very rich man. He wanted to take the body of Jesus and then put it in that tomb. Now the problem is that Joseph of Arimathea, as a rich man, would not have had his brand new tomb 100 yards away, a stone's throw away from the location where the Romans were committing, their mass executions and where Jesus was crucified. I don't see how that's at all possible. A nice tomb is not going to be around a smelly pit where they're throwing dead bodies. And we have that information from the Gospels of Jesus buried in a very, very nice tomb. So I think it has to be somewhere else. I also want to clarify that I think it's beautiful, and this is taken from a friend here in Jerusalem who's also said this. It's beautiful that we don't really know where Jesus was buried. And we don't need to know, because I think the danger is that we go to a tomb and we start to worship the tomb, but the tomb is not significant in the sense that Jesus rose from the tomb. He is living and reigning in heaven, and that's what we celebrate. I think if we had a tomb, we would go there, we want to worship it. It would become maybe a sort of idol, in the same way that the Jews do not know where Moses was buried, and Moses is really a hero for them. What would be the problem if they knew where Moses was buried? They would probably go there and they would turn it into a kind of idol. They would sit there and they would worship the tomb. And we would be guilty of the same thing, I think, worshiping the tomb of Jesus. And so I think it's really fantastic that I don't think the Garden Tomb is the location where Jesus died. I don't think this tomb works either. So it's a beautiful thing that we don't need to worship a tomb. We worship the risen Lord. And that's what's so special about the Christian faith. There is no need to go and find a place where Jesus was dead and wrapped in cloths for 3 days. We instead do not need to find that place. We instead just need to worship the risen Lord who sits at the right hand of God the Father. I want to tell you all something else that really interests me about this church, and that is something called the institution of status quo. Status quo was put in place at this holy site and a few others, and this just means that all of the Christian groups at these holy sites, of which there are many different groups, had ownership of certain parts, and then they had responsibilities to carry out based on ownership of their portion. And there's something here that actually represents the divisions caused by status quo, I think you could say, quite perfectly, and that is the ladder that sits right up there. I'll show you here in a second, outside one of the windows of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Let's see if we can kind of show it right now. That ladder has quite a history. It's been there since 1728, and it has not moved from that very position since 1757, and that's because of status quo. It can't be moved because no property may be touched or moved by any of the Christian groups unless the other 5 have consented. And it's really hard to get them all to agree in the proper manner. It's a lot harder than you think, so that ladder stays right there in that spot, because if one group goes and moves it, which it seems so simple, move a ladder, it could literally cause a mini war to break out inside of the church. Supposedly that ladder was one of an 18th century mason, and when his job at the church was finished, he left the ladder there. And so that window and ladder that we now see are in the Armenian portion of the church, but status quo, like I said, requires that it stay exactly where it is. The Armenians cannot just take it down because they feel like it. Everyone would have to agree on that. And it's actually funny because when Pope Paul VI went to Jerusalem in the 1960s, he wanted the ladder removed. He said it was a symbol of Christian disunity, but his wish didn't come true. Status quo held out, and nowadays it's kind of funny to most visitors to hear that story. Who would have ever thought that a ladder would be so divisive? So now you know the famous story of status quo at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And this right here behind me is the Golgotha Rock, where Jesus Christ was crucified. He might have been crucified a little bit farther down. Obviously, the layers that were on the main layer of Jerusalem right now is kind of much higher than the original layer in Jesus' time. But this is part of the rock that he would have been crucified on by the Roman authorities.